So this is a 13-year-old Missouri fox trotter, and the vet said had some arthritis in the hock. I do agree. I'm going to take you through this, but it does look like she's off on that left hind, and she shortens her stride. She does drag her toe some, and she doesn't reach underneath herself very much. So these are the symptoms of hock issues or hock arthritis. A lot of the horses, when they're standing still tied up in the cross ties, they'll shift their weight back and forth from one hind leg to the other hind leg. As it's really bad or very painful, some will hold their leg up when resting, or when they get up from laying down, they will hold their leg up or kind of push it back and forth like they're kicking at something. And sometimes once they get up and they start walking, they actually are limping pretty bad, and then they walk out of it and look fine. So that can be very confusing. A lot of horses have stiffness, especially when they start moving, just like we do with arthritis, and then it gets better the more they move. Some of the horses do drag their toe, and that's because they don't want to bend and use that hock. And so that toe starts getting in the way because they're not lifting their leg as high, and that's why they start squaring off that toe, which can confuse people because sometimes they'll think it's a stifle problem, but it's actually coming from the hock. When some of the horses compensate, their back will start getting sore. And again, they're compensating to protect their hock, and then they start making everything else sore. Some of them will have intermittent lameness where one day they look fine, the next day they don't. You go in to take them out, they're limping, and then later on in their day, they're perfectly fine. So that can be confusing as well. If you watch them closely and the horse is trotting, you can usually see that they've shortened their stride, or if they're gaiting, you'll see they're not reaching up as much. And many of them will have difficulty going downhill. They'll either speed up or try to trot downhill to get down the hill quicker, or some of them will throw their head up and down or blatantly refuse to go down the hill. So you want to be on the outlook for all these signs when a horse is having problems to figure out if it's in its hocks or not. The other thing you'll see is that when you spin these horses around, sometimes that will start making them limp, and it will usually flare it up. Their hocks can also be warm or swollen, and it's always good to have a vet check all those things for you, since some of us are not as good, of course, because we're not vets, on assessing that. But if you're unsure, a lameness specialist will usually figure it out very quickly, as well as you can see it on the x-rays. This is when she was trotting. And so what I want you to see is that right hind leg, how far it comes up to the front leg. So you can see a fair amount of a V, and there's only just a little space in between. And actually, when she was trotting, she actually stepped up here when it landed, but I couldn't get that on the photo. Now I want you to compare that when this left hind leg comes up. Okay, so this, I'm trying to back away so it doesn't do something weird with the computer. This left hind leg doesn't come up as far as the right one did. You'll see a bigger space here. That's why I drew this line right here, so you could see that space. So she's short striding on that left hind. So here she was moving a little faster. So you'll see on the right, she's coming right up into that front hoof print. So she is reaching under herself on the right-hand side. And then this is the left-hand side again. So you'll see that space in here, and she's not reaching up as much. Also, if you look at her hindquarters, she's kind of dropping down on this side, and then compare that to the other side where she's carrying herself pretty level. So it definitely looks to me like she is off. It's mild, it's not extreme. And when they have hock arthritis, what happens is they have lots of bones in their hocks, which I'll get a picture of that too. And as they're getting arthritis, what happens is, just like us, the bones start to get narrow in between. That's where their cartilage is, and then they start to form cysts, and those cysts can be quite painful. Now, x-rays on horses are more difficult to look at because they have so much more weight on their leg than humans do. So sometimes the x-rays don't look that bad, but it's all that weight that's on top of them. So the hock will look kind of like a wrist x-ray compared to humans because they have so many of these little bones in here. But usually where they're getting the arthritis is in this area here. So it is a little bit narrow. She's got sclerotic changes, which means it's brighter white in that area. And then she's getting some cyst in there. Let me change the picture. But you'll see narrowing here and here, but this is usually more common than getting arthritis on that side of the hock. So this is just another view, but there's narrowing in here, and then also looks, it could be the x-ray, but it looks like she's getting some fluid in the hock right here as well. And then this is just a side view, but narrowing in here, x-ray. So what'll usually happen over time is that the hock joint will actually fuse. So when they're having symptoms, that's when it's inflamed the most. And then if we treat it and get them through it over time, once the hock fuses, the horse might have a shorter stride, but it'll actually be a lot more comfortable. So injections do help. When they inject, the great vets, if they have x-ray or what they call live x-ray, is they'll inject and they'll be able to see where they're putting the needle to make sure they're getting it right to the spot that they want to. That way, if they inject in one area and the horse doesn't get better, they can always go back and inject in another area. So it's great if they take pictures while they're injecting with that needle so they see and also you see where they actually injected the horse. The injections are usually the fastest, and it's usually cortisone, but you can ask what they're recommending that they put in there. But the cortisone usually helps a lot. Besides cortisone, they can inject alcohol into the area. Some are doing that because it's helping the joint. Well, the alcohol actually destroys the cartilage, which helps the joint to alkalose, which means the joint fuses together. And then once it's fused together, the horse might have a little bit shorter motion, but then it doesn't have the pain that it had before. And they do that in a lot of sport horses, and that has seemed to work well. So you just want to check with the vet on what they want to inject into it. The other thing that can help them, because she might have arthritis in other parts in her body, is either putting her on Cosequin or something like adequan or legend, which you usually repeat every 6 months or a year. But you can talk to your vet about that. But I always like to put them on a daily supplement that would try to help. Some people use Cosequin. There's also something called Devil's Claw that some people like a lot for inflammation in their horse, and said it doesn't cost as much. Can be confusing for a lot of people because they drag their toes a lot with stifle problems, but you can see how she's kind of squared this off compared to her other toe. And then she's actually very straight in her legs, which I'll try to put on the camera. They'll square off this toe because they don't want to extend their hock. And so then they end up dragging this toe like they do in stifle problems, but it is coming from the hock region. Her x-rays of her stifles looked pretty good. I don't see a lot of arthritis in there, but she does have arthritis in her hocks on the x-rays. Now, you didn't get a picture of her hock, so I can't tell you anything about the upper area here, but the way she comes down in her pasterns, she is very straight, and what that does is usually gives them more concussion in their leg, and so they can end up with hock issues. So that's just her confirmation, but it might have added to the problem. It might not have. It just could have been her genetics, or it could have been that from trauma, like we get osteoarthritis, is from trauma over the years. But I do think that toe is more coming from her hock issue, from her trying to protect her leg, versus coming from a stifle issue. And then you can see here too, because I watched all the videos is to see in different spots if she got better, it's still not as close. So when she starts off here, you can see she's kind of stiff. You'll see it a little bit better in slow motion. So it's her left hind. But see how she moves her pelvis, and then watch what she's doing with her leg. So she just looks uncomfortable to me. And then as she's moving, she's short striding there, which means she's not taking a full step. So she's trying to protect herself. I mean, she's a nice mare. She's trying to do what you're asking, even though she's in pain. And at times it gets a little bit better, but it's never the same as the right. She's never bringing that left hind in as far. And of course it's harder when they're going to the left. That makes it worse. If it's soft tissue, sometimes you can see that better on the soft footing. But if it's arthritis, a lot of times you'll see it on both the soft footing and then on hard footing. So she keeps cross cantering. That can be another sign. And then she bunny hops some of the time as well. So she's trying to do it, but you can see she's just not comfortable with those back legs, and then her footing gave out, or the stifle gave out there.
And trot.
So she's just not reaching up. And she definitely looks like she's sore. It's mild, so it's not horrible. Some people would miss that, but it's a good thing to catch because you're trying to keep them comfortable until that hock fuses. So as she's walking away in this video, you can't see a lot. You can watch how her pelvis moves, but her left hind does seem to cross over some. It comes more towards the middle line on her. And then once she's out there, she just looks stiff. It's not like she's bobbing her head really bad, you know, or limping. She just looks stiff on that side. And I'm so used to looking at body mechanics and horses and in people, since I did orthopedic surgery, that, you know, I can see it easily, but some people may not. So here in slow motion, you can see a little bit better that that left hind isn't reaching up as much on her. So just keep watching those back legs. And you'll just see she takes a nice big step with that right hind, and the left is like 3/4 of the step there. And then with this video here, she never trotted back, so I couldn't see that much on it. But I did see when you were cantering her under saddle and when she was cantering loose that she was bunny hopping and cross cantering and just looked uncomfortable. So I do agree with the vet. I think you should talk with the vet further, discuss injections and a plan, and you might have to give her some time off after those injections for her to recover. But once her hock fuses, she should be comfortable and function quite well.